Hi there. Today I'm lucky enough to be tasting an icon of New Zealand's wines. This is Cloudy Bay's Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc 2022, and Cloudy Bay very kindly sent me a bottle to review. I think possibly one of the impetuses of them sending this out, this is recently released, is the new packaging that they've just adopted, where I think they're trying to premiumise the brand a little. So we've got a bottle here with embossing on. There's a Cloudy Bay logo there, CB, and the date 1985, which was when the winery was started. And then with the top of the label there being cut to a sort of a hill mountain shape there, there's an embossing behind that of a further mountain range in the background there. And that echoes the previous label, which actually was fairly historic for Cloudy Bay. I think the story is that the picture on the label had been was based on a photograph taken by Kevin Judd, who was their first winemaker. And the label echoed the style of the label also of Cape Montel, which was the other property that David Honan, the founder, had also owned and started in Western Australia. So a sister property. So a bit of a departure there, and as I say, I think an attempt to slightly premiumise the packaging, and that's left us here at Wine Searcher, wondering whether they've succeeded or not. One or two people feel that within the office feel that maybe this packaging looks a little bit more like a sort of a higher volume, cheaper brand equivalent. I mean, please feel free to let us know what you think in the comments below, because we'd be interested to know. I mean, to be fair, Cloudy Bay is a New Zealand icon. I mean, this is, when we look at our website, this is the second most searched for Sauvignon Blanc on the website and app, and is the most searched for New Zealand wine. So the winemakers here and viticulturists have quite a job to do to keep this wine true to its iconic status. So how do they do that? Well, let's just have a talk through that, because actually in some ways Sauvignon Blanc apparently is quite a simple wine to make. Now, Cloudy Bay are fortunate, having been one of the early vineyards to establish in Marlborough, that they own some vineyard in some of the best areas of the Wairau Valley, which are classically produced around Renwick, etc., on the valley floor, but classically used to produce Sauvignon Blanc. A lot of these vineyards have relatively mature vines, so that helps to reduce yields a little and to increase concentration. And also they're planted with older clones, which tend to be slightly lower yielding as well. On top of this, quite deliberately, they'll restrict yields. Now, restricting yields in Marlborough is, some people might find laughable. I mean, the yields here are kept down to 10 tonnes per hectare, which would be considered fairly high in most areas, until you think that a lot of producers here will be producing at 15 tonnes per hectare. So, and what that does is, evidently the aromatics, it has very little effect on those, are still very pungent, but it's supposed to, keeping the yields down is supposed to sort of add intensity and weight to the fruit, and that's what they're trying to do with this wine in most of the ways that they're producing it. I've heard people suggest that sometimes they blend a little Semillon into Cloudy Bay, but none of the information from the winery suggests that that's the case in this instance. It may have happened a while ago, but looking back at the last few vintages, there's no indication that this is anything other than 100% Semillon. What they do on the other hand, is to ferment a little bit of it in barrel, so about 5% of the blend goes into large old oak. So you're not getting an oak influence, but you're getting a warmer ferment that produces more richness in the wine and gives you a little more complexity in the flavours. As well as that, they've actually more recently started working with keeping some batches, I think it said about 8% of the blend is allowed to start its fermentation with indigenous yeasts. They're still using cultured yeasts to finish the ferment, to make sure that it's completely dry, finishes completely dry. So starting with a wider diversity of yeasts gives a greater complexity of flavours, and again, that style of ferment tends to give a little more richness. Other things, quality-wise, I should have mentioned actually that for about a decade now they haven't used machine harvesters, so the quality of the fruit coming into the winery should be that little bit better in terms of that the fruit won't be broken and there will be less oxidation prior to it reaching the winery. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? I mean, first of all, the colour. There's not an awful lot to say about the colour. It's almost whitish, maybe tiniest hints of yellow, perhaps a little greenish tinge there, although that could be a reflection of the glass there from the bottle. What I would say is, even before I've moved the glass up towards my nose or started agitating it to release the aromas, I can smell vivid, intense asparagus and pea pod notes. They're quite pungent, and as I swirl them and as I stick my nose in, gosh, yes, there's this immediacy, as I say, of I suppose it's green rather than white asparagus and you know, green pea pod, but then behind that there's a minerality, a sort of a whetstone note, maybe a hint of lime, maybe, you know, some lifted blossom aromas, but you know, really front and centre is that sort of rich green, but not sappy green, sort of, you know, quite a full sort of green note there. So to taste it, right from the outset, the wine has really intense fruit. It's really front of mouth. It's, you know, medium bodied, very sort of intense, again, that sort of pea pod note, some asparagus, maybe heading on in as it gets to the middle of the flavours there to a more sort of gooseberry note, because behind the rich fruit there's some really, really crisp, minerally, slightly lemony acidity. But the fruit is, as I say, you get the fruit first and then you pick up the acidity. So you go from this sort of green pea pod note into a gooseberry note. And I suppose actually I'm saying lemony, but it's richer than that. It's more a limey acidity. And then you're starting to get sort of flinty, whetstone, mineral notes to the finish. The alcohol is not standing out at all there. It's, the bottle says 13.5%. I believe it's actually 13.3 analytically. But there's not a weight of alcohol that's stopping the perfume coming out on the finish. So you've got this sort of long, crisp, citric finish with actually quite a mineral note to the acidity. And this sort of rounded, I suppose slightly oily textured fruit of sort of mid-weight, maybe slightly more than mid-weight, maybe medium to full-bodied, delivering lots of intensity. I actually think that you know, the last few vintages of Cloudy Bay I've tried, I've been relatively impressed with, but this actually stands out as sort of, you know, being that touch above those. So do please let us know what you think about the packaging, but actually I think the wine in the bottle, really nice example of a good New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So yes, thank you very much for watching. This is Cloudy Bay 2022 Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough.